If you're the kind of woman who learned to smile softly and say, "I'm fine," even when something inside you wasn't, stay with me for a moment. You don't need to answer anything. You don't need to explain yourself. Just let me be here with you, exactly as you are right now. If you've ever felt proud of being easy, of not asking for much, of not needing to be reminded or reassured or held too tightly, this isn't about taking that pride away from you. It's about understanding where it came from. Because what I see isn't a woman who wanted less. What I see is a woman who learned to be careful. You didn't become easy. You became attentive. You became observant. You became someone who noticed the room before you spoke, who measured the tone before you shared, who sensed when a question might cost more than it gave back. And that didn't happen by accident. Somewhere along the way, asking felt unsafe. Not dramatic, not dangerous in a loud way, just quietly unsafe. The kind of unsafe where your voice didn't disappear, but it softened. The kind where you learned to phrase needs as suggestions, or jokes, or silence. The kind where you realized it was simpler to carry things yourself than to watch someone pull away when you reached out. So you adapted. You learned how to be low maintenance not because you lacked depth, but because depth once went unanswered. You learned how to say, "Don't worry about me," because you didn't want to become the reason someone sighed, or closed off, or looked tired of listening. You learned how to make yourself small enough to stay. I'm not saying this to stir pain. I'm saying it because I recognize the intelligence in it. There's a quiet brilliance in how you survived emotionally. You paid attention, you adjusted, you protected what mattered to you by not putting it in places that couldn't hold it. And I want you to hear this clearly, without argument or correction. Nothing about that makes you weak. When I look at you through this lens, I don't see a woman who lacks needs. I see a woman who learned that needs, spoken at the wrong time or to the wrong person, could cost connection. So you chose connection. You chose peace. You chose not to rock the water you were standing in. You probably became very good at it. Good at anticipating moods. Good at smoothing moments. Good at telling yourself, "It's not a big deal," before it had the chance to become one. And from the outside, people may have called you calm, independent, easygoing. They may have admired how little you asked for. But inside, there was a different conversation happening. One that sounded more like restraint than freedom. One that said, "I can handle this." One that said, "I don't want to ask again." One that said, "It's safer this way." I'm not here to take that coping away from you. I'm not here to tell you that you should have done it differently. You did exactly what made sense with the information and experiences you had at the time. Anyone with your sensitivity, your awareness, your capacity to feel would have learned the same thing. What matters is that the part of you that became careful was trying to keep you from being hurt again. And that part deserves respect. I want to slow this down with you for a second, because this is important. There's a difference between being low maintenance and being unseen. Between choosing simplicity and choosing silence. Between generosity and self-erasure. You didn't wake up one day deciding you wanted less love. You learned to want less because wanting more once felt like standing too exposed. If you've ever wondered why you can give so much warmth but hesitate to receive it, why you can listen deeply but pause before sharing your own weight, why you can be present for others while quietly telling yourself you're okay, this is why. It wasn't that you didn't trust yourself. It was that you learned not everyone knew how to hold what you offered. So you became selective without calling it that. You became careful without labeling it. You wrapped your needs in politeness. You learned to be gracious about disappointment. You learned how to stay even when parts of you felt unheard. And I'm sitting here with you now, not to analyze you, not to pull you apart, not to name this as a flaw to be fixed. I'm here to say that I see the pattern, and I honor the intelligence behind it. You didn't harden. You refined. You didn't stop feeling. You learned when it was safe to show it. If there's a tenderness in you that's been resting quietly, it's not because it disappeared. It's because it learned patience. It learned timing. It learned how to wait for a space that wouldn't require it to shrink. I'm not asking you to change anything right now. I'm not asking you to speak louder, ask more, or push yourself into vulnerability. I'm simply here, noticing the care you learned, and acknowledging that it came from somewhere real. And as we sit in this recognition together, something subtle begins to shift, not because you're doing anything differently, but because you're no longer misunderstood. When someone finally names what you carried as wisdom instead of deficiency, the body softens a little, The guard doesn't need to be so tight. The story doesn't have to be rewritten yet, but it can breathe. That's all we're doing here. Breathing together, letting the truth land gently, letting you stay exactly as careful as you needed to be, while beginning to feel what it's like to be seen without having to ask for it. I want to stay right here with you, in the quiet that follows recognition. Not to rush past it, not to dress it up, just to let the truth keep unfolding at its own pace. Because when I listen closely to what you've lived, I don't hear fear of love. I hear something more precise, more intimate. You weren't afraid to care. You were afraid of what happened after you cared out loud. There's a moment many women like you remember, even if they can't point to a single scene. A moment when needing didn't feel welcomed. It felt inconvenient, misread, or worse, ignored. Not with cruelty, but with absence. And absence can teach a lesson faster than anger ever could. So you learned. You learned that asking didn't always bring closeness. Sometimes it brought distance. A pause in the voice on the other end. A look that said, I didn't sign up for this. A subtle shift where warmth cooled just enough for you to notice. And when you notice once, you adapt. When you notice twice, you remember. When it happens enough times, your body stops offering the question before your mouth ever forms it. This is the part people rarely understand. You didn't stop needing, you stopped risking the cost of expressing it. There's a difference, a deep one. You might have been told you were strong for handling things alone, capable, independent, and maybe you were. But strength isn't the same as safety. You didn't choose solitude because you preferred it. You chose it because it felt predictable, because it didn't disappear when you leaned on it. So you made an internal agreement with yourself, one that sounded reasonable, almost noble. I won't ask unless I really have to. I'll figure it out. I don't want to be a burden. And over time, that agreement hardened into habit. Not bitterness. Habit. I imagine you becoming very good at this. You learned how to adjust expectations quietly, how to downplay disappointment before it showed on your face, how to tell yourself, it's fine, and mean it just enough to get through the day. From the outside, it looked like grace. From the inside, it felt like caution. And I want to be careful with this next part, because it matters. This wasn't about drama or instability or emotional excess. It was about calibration. You were calibrating yourself to environments that couldn't always meet you where you were. That takes awareness. That takes intelligence. That takes a kind of emotional engineering most people never acknowledge. When needing felt dangerous, you didn't become cold. You became precise. You learned when to speak and when to wait. You learned how to read energy before revealing anything tender. You learned how to sense whether the room could hold what you were about to bring into it. And slowly, almost invisibly, you stopped bringing as much. Not because you had less to offer, but because you were protecting what mattered. I hear women say things like, I'm just low-key, or I don't ask for much, and they say it with a small smile, as if it's a personality trait. But when I listen beneath that, I hear a history, a series of moments where reaching out didn't feel safe enough to repeat, and I don't want to correct that story. I want to sit beside it. Because here's the quiet truth I want you to feel, rather than analyze. The part of you that learned restraint was loyal to you. It wasn't trying to sabotage connection. It was trying to preserve dignity. It was trying to keep you from the small, accumulating hurts that happen when needs are dismissed without explanation. You may have noticed something else, too, that even when you were with someone, you kept a part of yourself slightly withdrawn, not shut down, just prepared to self-soothe, prepared to step back, prepared to not need too much. That preparation wasn't pessimism. It was experience, speaking softly. And I want you to know how I'm hearing this. I'm not hearing someone who is difficult to love. I'm hearing someone who learned to love without guarantees. Someone who stayed gentle in environments that didn't always return gentleness in the same measure. When I say, I understand you, this is what I mean. Needing felt dangerous because it once led to disappointment that had nowhere to land. Because you had to hold the aftermath alone. Because no one taught you how to ask and be met at the same time. So you chose the safer route. You chose not to ask. And if part of you wonders whether that choice changed you, whether it made you quieter than you might have been, softer in places that wanted to speak, there's no blame in that wondering. Only curiosity. Only tenderness. I'm not here to tell you that you should have needed more boldly. I'm here to say that your caution makes sense, that it came from somewhere real, that it doesn't mean you are closed, it means you are discerning. And as we keep sitting together in this understanding, something subtle continues to unfold. Not a demand, not a push, just the slow realization that being careful was never the same as being incapable of being met. It was simply the only way you knew how to stay whole at the time. So let's keep moving gently, without forcing anything open. Let the recognition settle. Let the body exhale. Let the part of you that learned to protect feel acknowledged, not challenged. Because when someone finally understands why needing felt dangerous, the danger softens on its own, not all at once, not dramatically, just enough to allow the next breath to arrive without bracing. And that's where we remain steady, present, unhurried, allowing the truth to keep revealing itself, one quiet layer at a time. Stay with me here, just a little longer, not because anything is missing, but because something is beginning to rearrange itself gently inside you. I want to say this slowly, in a way that doesn't ask you to argue with it or defend yourself against it. Being low maintenance is not who you are. It's something you learned. And what is learned is not fixed in stone. It's responsive. It's alive. It shifts when the environment shifts. You didn't build your life around wanting less. You built it around surviving with grace, around staying open without bleeding, around finding a way to remain kind without becoming invisible. That's not destiny. That's adaptation. And here's the reframe I want to offer you, not as a correction, but as an invitation to see yourself more fully. You were never meant to be low maintenance. You were meant to be met. There's a difference that changes everything. Low maintenance is what happens when someone learns that ease is safer than honesty, when smoothness keeps the peace, when needs are edited before they're spoken. But destiny doesn't grow out of editing yourself down. Destiny grows where there's space to arrive whole. I'm not talking about becoming demanding. I'm not talking about swinging to the other extreme. This isn't about turning into someone loud or rigid or perpetually dissatisfied. It's about recognizing that you were never asking for too much. You were often asking in rooms that didn't know how to listen. When I imagine the woman you are beneath the carefulness, I don't see excess. I see clarity. I see someone who knows what nourishes her and what drains her. Someone whose needs aren't chaotic, but considered, thoughtful, grounded. That's not maintenance heavy. That's emotionally literate. And, from where I'm standing, a woman who knows what she needs doesn't drain love. She gives it direction. She tells the truth of where warmth can land and stay. She makes intimacy possible without forcing it. You may have spent years believing that love required you to be undemanding in order to be kept. That if you stayed easy, things would stay calm. That if you didn't ask, you wouldn't risk disappointment. Those beliefs didn't come from nowhere. They were built through repetition, through watching what happened when you leaned in a little too far. But here's the quiet shift happening now. You're not being asked to unlearn your sensitivity. You're being asked to stop mistaking it for a limit. Sensitivity isn't fragility. It's information. It's the reason you noticed when something felt off. It's the reason you adapted early instead of exploding later. And it's also the reason you're capable of a depth of connection that doesn't need theatrics to feel real. Low maintenance was never your highest expression. It was a compromise you made with circumstances. A temporary shape you took on to fit into spaces that weren't built with you in mind. And compromises can be released without judgment. I want to be clear about something, because this is where misunderstandings often creep in. You don't have to suddenly want more. You don't have to articulate needs you're not ready to speak. You don't have to perform self-advocacy as proof of growth. Healing isn't a performance. It's a soft, internal recalibration. Sometimes healing looks like simply allowing the possibility that wanting isn't dangerous anymore, not acting on it, just allowing it to exist without apology. You might notice this first as a quiet curiosity, a small internal question. What if I didn't have to earn space by being easy? What if my presence alone was already enough? These questions don't demand answers, they're signals. They tell you the old framework is loosening. And I'm not here to rush that process. I'm here to stand inside it with you. From my side of this, I don't feel threatened by a woman's needs. I feel oriented by them. They don't feel like weight. They feel like coordinates. They let me know where care matters, where attention belongs, where presence actually counts. So when I say that low maintenance isn't your destiny, I'm not rejecting who you've been. I'm honoring who you protected. The part of you that stayed quiet so the rest of you could stay intact. That part doesn't need to disappear. It just doesn't need to lead anymore. You're allowed to imagine a connection where ease doesn't come from self-denial, but from alignment. Where calm doesn't require silence, where asking doesn't create distance. Even imagining that softly, without expectation, begins to change how the nervous system responds to closeness. Nothing dramatic needs to happen for this reframe to take root. No declarations, no sudden shifts, just the growing awareness that your worth was never measured by how little you asked for. As this awareness settles, you might feel moments of unfamiliar spaciousness, a pause where you would normally dismiss a feeling, a breath where you would normally move on. These moments aren't demands for action. They're invitations to notice that something inside you is no longer bracing the same way, and we keep going from here without pressure, without labels, without telling you what comes next, just allowing this new orientation to quietly reshape how you see yourself in relation to love, presence, and being met. I'm still right here with you, not pulling, not pushing, just staying steady as the idea lands that you were never meant to be low maintenance forever. You were meant to be received. You don't have to ask yet. I want you to feel that sentence land without conditions attached to it. There is no expectation in my voice right now, no timeline, no quiet test to see whether you'll speak up or stay silent. I'm not waiting for you to articulate anything more clearly, or sooner, or better. I'm here without a checklist, without a goal hidden behind patience, because presence doesn't require performance. If you've spent years learning that closeness often came with an unspoken price, explain yourself, justify yourself, soften yourself, then it makes sense that even the idea of asking would tighten something inside you. Asking once meant stepping into uncertainty. Asking twice meant risking disappointment. So, eventually, you learn to live comfortably inside what you could manage alone. And I want to interrupt that pattern gently, not by challenging it, but by removing the urgency from it. You don't have to ask yet. You don't have to reach for the words that once failed you. You don't have to name your needs clearly, cleanly, courageously. You don't have to decide whether you want more, less, or something entirely different. Right now, all that's required is that you don't have to hold yourself so tightly while you're here. There's a difference between being alone and being unaccompanied. You may have grown very good at being alone with your thoughts, your feelings, your quiet disappointments, but being accompanied is something else. It doesn't ask you to change. It doesn't demand vulnerability. It simply stays. So I'm staying. If your instinct is to stay composed, I respect that. If your instinct is to listen more than you speak, I'm not trying to shift that. I'm not here to pull something out of you before it's ready to emerge on its own. Readiness can't be rushed, and safety can't be forced. What matters is that you don't have to shrink to remain welcome. You don't have to smooth over discomfort. You don't have to package your feelings into something palatable. You don't have to monitor how much space you're taking up. Space isn't scarce here. It isn't something you earn by being agreeable or undemanding. Sometimes, presence looks like nothing happening at all. Just two people breathing in the same moment, without anyone trying to direct the outcome. That kind of stillness can feel unfamiliar if you're used to proving your value through usefulness or ease. So, if part of you keeps waiting for the moment when the other shoe drops, I understand that too. Waiting for impatience, waiting for withdrawal, waiting for the signal that says, now you're asking for too much. That signal isn't coming. And I don't need you to trust that right away. Trust takes time, and time takes consistency. I'm not asking you to override your instincts. I'm asking you to let them rest for a moment. Just enough to notice that nothing is being demanded of you here. You don't have to ask yet because nothing is being withheld. If you stay quiet, I don't read that as distance. If you take your time, I don't read that as uncertainty. I don't need you to prove engagement by revealing something tender. Your presence is already a form of participation. I know what it's like to sit across from someone and feel the subtle pressure to perform emotional competence, to say the right thing at the right time, to show growth, to demonstrate readiness. That pressure can turn even gentle moments into evaluations. This isn't that. Here, silence isn't a gap to be filled. It's a place to settle. A place where your nervous system can slowly learn that closeness doesn't always arrive with demands attached. You may notice your body before your thoughts catch up. A small release in your shoulders. A breath that goes a little deeper. A moment where you don't feel the need to prepare your next response. Those shifts don't mean anything needs to happen next. They're simply signals that something is different. And difference doesn't require explanation. I'm not keeping score of what you offer or don't offer. I'm not measuring progress by how open you become. I'm here because being present is enough on its own. That may feel almost too simple if you're used to earning steadiness through effort. But simplicity doesn't mean superficial. It means there's room for you to arrive at your own pace, to notice what you feel without translating it immediately into language, to let emotions exist without deciding what they imply. You don't have to ask yet, because sometimes the deepest form of care is not being hurried into self-disclosure. It's being allowed to exist without explanation. If one day you feel the impulse to speak, I'll listen. If that day hasn't arrived, I'm not watching the clock. I'm not quietly hoping you'll hurry up and meet me somewhere. I'm already here. And I want you to feel the steadiness of that. Not as a promise, not as reassurance meant to override your caution. Just as a consistent presence that doesn't recede when things are quiet. There's a kind of intimacy that doesn't come from sharing stories or naming needs. It comes from being allowed to remain exactly where you are without pressure to move forward. That's what this is. So stay as you are. Thoughtful, careful, aware. Let yourself experience what it's like to not have to manage the moment. Let the awareness settle that nothing is required from you in order to be met with attention. We can remain right here, without urgency, without expectation, letting the sense of safety build slowly in the background, quietly reshaping what closeness feels like when it isn't earned, requested, or negotiated, just offered, steadily, and without condition. I want to stay close to you in this moment, not by pulling you toward anything, but by letting what has already unfolded rest gently between us. I'm not scared of what you need. I want you to hear that without urgency, without it sounding like a promise you're expected to test. I'm not saying it so you'll suddenly speak up. I'm saying it so the part of you that learned to hide can relax its grip. Just a little. There's a difference. You've lived long enough to know that fear doesn't always show itself as rejection. Sometimes it shows up as subtle withdrawal, as impatience disguised as practicality, as someone saying, I didn't realize it was that important, after it already was. Those moments teach you to edit yourself quietly, to make your needs smaller before they can be misunderstood. So when I say I'm not scared of what you need, I'm not asking you to list anything. I'm not asking you to define yourself through desire. I'm simply letting you know that whatever exists inside you doesn't threaten my steadiness. You don't overwhelm me by being human. You don't burden me by wanting closeness. You don't complicate things by needing care. What complicates connection is pretending those things aren't there. I can sense how careful you've become around this. How you sometimes hold your breath before sharing, as if measuring whether the moment can carry what you might say. That carefulness isn't something I want to strip away. It protected you when protection was necessary, but it doesn't have to work so hard here. I'm not intimidated by depth. I don't confuse need with weakness. I don't hear desire as demand. I hear it as information, as honesty, as something that gives shape to intimacy rather than threatening it. You may not be used to that response. You may be more familiar with environments where wanting required justification, or where asking felt like crossing an invisible line. That history matters. It explains why even gentle reassurance can feel suspicious at first. So, let's not turn this into reassurance. Let's turn it into presence. I'm here without flinching. I'm here without bracing. I'm here without a narrative about where this should go. If one day you decide to let a need rise closer to the surface, it won't surprise me. If that day doesn't come for a long time, that doesn't diminish what's already real between us in this moment. Nothing about this depends on acceleration. I'm not waiting for you to become more open. I'm not holding patience as leverage. I'm not interpreting your pace as resistance. I'm simply here, steady enough to remain when things stay quiet. And there's something healing in that steadiness that doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't ask for trust up front. It allows trust to form the way it always does, when it's genuine, slowly, almost imperceptibly, through consistency rather than persuasion. You don't have to test me. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to check whether your needs are acceptable before allowing yourself to feel them. They already are. What you've needed all along wasn't permission. It was an environment that didn't collapse when you showed up fully, an atmosphere where care didn't feel conditional, a presence that didn't retreat when the conversation deepened. I can be that presence without making it dramatic. I don't need to promise you anything about the future to be reliable right now. Reliability lives in the moment-to-moment quality of attention, not in declarations. It lives in staying when there's nothing impressive happening, in listening without steering, in not disappearing when things become tender or undefined. That's what I'm offering you, not something to hold on to, but something to rest beside. You've spent enough time managing yourself to fit into other people's limits. You don't need to do that here, not because I expect more from you, but because I don't need you to be smaller to stay connected. And I want to be very clear about one thing, so nothing gets tangled or misunderstood. This isn't about replacing anything in your life. It isn't about becoming the center of your emotional world. It's about reminding you that your needs can exist without creating instability. Sometimes the deepest reassurance isn't someone saying, "Tell me everything." It's someone saying, "You don't have to." So if all you do is stay present with yourself a little more gently after this, that's enough. If all that shifts is the way you think about your own needs, not as liabilities, but as truths, that's already meaningful. I'm not scared of what you need, because I trust your capacity to know yourself. I trust the wisdom that kept you intact. I trust the pace you move at. And as we remain here, without forcing an ending, without sealing anything closed, there's a quiet understanding settling in, one that doesn't need to be spoken out loud. You don't have to disappear from yourself to stay connected. You don't have to edit your truth to be held. You don't have to rush toward expression to be met with presence. I'm here, steady and unafraid, letting that understanding continue to unfold naturally, without pressure, so whatever comes next can arrive on its own terms, already supported by the calm of being seen without having to ask.